Hi everyone, Magnus here, and I have just finished watching the Speed Chess Championship semi-finals match between Hikaru and Alireza Firouzja, and it was quite the match. Now, Firouzja always seemed to have quite a dominant hold from the very start. A lot of people were expecting Hikaru to be a strong favorite, maybe even like 60-40 or 65-35, but Firouzja proved everyone wrong today with an absolutely dominant performance against Hikaru from start to finish, only really letting it slip a little bit in the bullet when everything was already decided. Now, this might be a little bit of a shame for some people that did want to see a Hikaru Magnus match, but you never know. We've still got Hans versus Magnus tonight, so everyone might get what they wanted in the end, except potentially with a Firouzja Hans final. Wouldn't that be a shocker? Okay. I selected 4 games to look at from this match. I watched all of them, and these were the 4 that I think looked like the best to show. And let's get into the analysis. So, in this game, Firouzja had the white pieces and started with pawn to e4. We get e5, and they were getting this pretty strange Roy Lopez position every time. Hikaru was playing something that I believe he'd used in his candidates prep. I think he had a game like this against Jan Nepomniachtchi, and he got a really unpleasant position but managed to draw, and it seems like he's not had enough of this strange position because he kept playing it over and over again in this match, even though he wasn't having the best success. Firouzja had innovated this knight e2 move, allowing bishop takes on f3 later on, getting the doubled structure, but at the same time building this big center pawn formation, this little triangle in the middle here, which is quite nice against the black pieces. He continued developing normally. Hikaru castled long, a very interesting decision, not going into the standard king position over here because of the fact that the rook might enter the g file and start to do some damage. But with Hikaru potentially getting his king to b7 and all these pieces, this looks quite safe for black. He starts to lash out with f6. And after Firouzja attacks the pawn, we get g6, which looks like a strange move because it just gives this pawn for free with tempo. But Hikaru is looking to try and access these light squares. And this pawn formation just looks abysmal for black, so no one was really expecting Alireza to go for this. But Firouzja says, pawn is a pawn is a pawn, give me that. And he grabs on f6. We get knight f5 as expected. Hikaru taking advantage of this terrible Irish pawn structure, targeting the e3 bishop here. So we actually do get a capture over here on f5, and Firouzja tries to start breaking apart the black king on the queen side. But once again, these pawns are just so bad, and Hikaru looks like he's just going to kind of stack up on the center and just tear down the white position. He does decide to take back a pawn rather than go b4, which could have closed down the position, which was in fact the best idea. I guess maybe a5 or some kind of sacrifice, queen b3, queen c2. Maybe Hikaru didn't want the queens to come off. I'm not exactly sure. But we do get queen f6, takes, and queen d3. And now the b5 pawn is a little bit weak, and somehow white's sketchy central structure is holding together. King f1 is a nice move, trying to get out of the pins down the center. Let's say you were to make queen takes b5, which is the best move. There would be threats of knight takes in the center, and after captures you could play queen takes because there would be a pin. So Firouzja sidesteps all of this, plays king to f1. We get b4. Hikaru doesn't want his pawn to be eaten. Rook g5 is a really nice idea by Firouzja. He potentially could even go for an exchange sacrifice. So let's say, I mean, obviously you can't play this because this pawn would hang. But let's say black plays some other waiting move. Even rook e5 might not be so bad because if the knight were to capture, you would get to take in the center and attacks the queen, attacks the bishop. All of a sudden, the knight is jumping into the game and attacking these squares. So I'm imagining that this exchange sacrifice was on the mind of Firouzja. But instead he stays patient. He doesn't go for rook e5 right away. That is absolutely the move that I would play. But he plays this very nice patient move, knight g3, anticipating the knight going to f5 by black. So knight g3, very nice. Hikaru a bit indecisive, going back with his knight to c6. But now the move rook e5 has lost some of its allure. Because of the fact that the knight is all the way over here, rather than ready to jump into the action. Okay, so Firouzja actually says, you know what, Hikaru, let's just play for a draw. I'm not too interested. But then he actually says, just kidding, I actually want to win, and moves his rook into the center. Then his queen starts to infiltrate down the side of the board, and there's this crazy engine move, bishop d2, just going for the b pawn and ignoring everything going down at the f file. This is missed. Firouzja just grabs a pawn, and g5. Hikaru's trying to tear down the kingside position. Queen h6 is a nice infiltrating move, looks very strong, but Firouzja comes up with this crazy move, king to e1, saying, I'm gonna get out of here. The king just goes for a run, ditches the king side, never even castles in the first place. King f1, king e1, very suspicious, two of the only moves. And we end up in this position. Hikaru sacrifices the rook, trying to pry away the white position, but after queen c6 check, the king moves rook a1. It is actually Hikaru that's getting checkmated, even with Firouzja's king totally bare in the middle. There's some desperate checks here, and we actually can't take the free rook, unfortunately, because as I said, there are two checkmates in the corner. So Hikaru is forced to exchange off the queens, but now after this move, another pawn drop, and it's just an exchange. I'll flick through the rest of the moves. There was a lot of shuffling, but it did end with a nice tactic, this game did. And that tactic was that after the king finally starts to make some progress, the king moves back, we get a check, and h4, closing the door on Hikaru. Because if you take on h4, there's just rook f5, and you drop the rook, and that's how the game ended. So, at this point, Firouzja was building a nice lead in the 5+1 section. 2 games later, I believe a draw and a win, we see Firouzja with the white pieces once again, getting a similar position as last time. As you can see, all stuff is repeating itself, and we get queen d7, but and now Firouzja mixes it up with a4. We haven't had a capture on f3 just yet. Firouzja is looking to undermine this structure on the queen side. We get castles, and this kind of looks like messed up to have around your king, but there is not an easy infiltration. Queen h3 isn't that good. You can just go knight g3 or knight f4 and hit the queen, but Hikaru does go in with his horsey. We get an exchange, and knight to h4. Hikaru looking for a quick win here, potentially trying to play queen h3 and queen g2, but Firouzja sharp today. He's not missing these tactics, plays pawn to e6. Now, pawn to e6 is an extremely nasty move. The point is that if you were to take here, then you will capture the horse, and you've blocked the queen's entrance to h3. Now, if you were to just take the knight, Hikaru is being tricky here. Queen h3, and your only move would be knight f4. There's knight f3. You'd have to give up the queen. But once the move e6 is played, super sharp. This is a blockading move. You're sacrificing the pawn to clog up the black position. If you take with the queen as well, there's knight to f4, hitting the queen and guarding h3, and then you will simply capture the knight. So Hikaru getting a little bit tricky here, but beaten right back with the move e6. We get queen d6, and Firouzja just takes the free horse. Knight f3, king g2, and this looks scary. Firouzja just wanders his king onto f3, but there's just not enough checkmating material. Knight f4, only move, blocking up the position. Sacrifices the rook and goes rook f8, but queen d2, cold-blooded by Firouzja g5 and king e2. He doesn't care. He's not trying to hold on to material with rook g2 or something like that, because that would simply lose the game. So rook takes f4, and you can't take back, and you would lose f2. So very calm and collected, moves back, just up a full rook, consolidates, takes on e6, check, and Hikaru moves back to h8 and resigns at the same time in light of this check, check, and just the game is pretty much over. And I guess rook g1 would be coming, and the black king gets mated pretty soon, like this. At the very least, all the pawns are dropping, the attack is dead, and there's not much to play for. So Hikaru resigned. All right, now into the 3-minute portion, we have e4, e5, and this time we're actually looking at Firouzja with the black pieces. Now, this game was actually pretty slow. There's a lot of exchanges. You got a pretty dry e4, e5, Berlin symmetrical position here. Now, you might notice that queen e2 is apparently a miss because of knight h5, knight f4, but the players are moving pretty quick. And they're ignoring this. This structure was appearing a lot of the time with this little cluster over here, but the c3 pawn's a little bit weak. So black has a small edge when playing. Lots of symmetry here. The queens eventually get traded. And you might be thinking, why am I showing you this game? This looks like a boring draw. Actually, the queens don't get traded for a long time, but you'll see they get traded in a very special way. So eventually, it looks like Firouzja is actually just forcing Hikaru to activate his queen and start winning all of the pawns. And after knight c4, it may look like he's now going after the white pawns in the same way. All right, let's make a draw. Let's all go home. But after queen takes a6, Firouzja throws in this cheeky little move, queen to c2. And he's just continuing to play. He's probing. He's just being a menace. Attacking the e4 pawn, saying to Hikaru, if you take this guy, I'm going to take on e4. And, you know, it's looking really quite difficult to actually hold this all together. Apparently, the only move's king g1. But then knight a3 hits the queen, and this knight's also loose. So this looks really quite unpleasant. Now, when it comes to what actually happened, queen a8, king g7, a little bit more shuffling, and queen takes b5 is just quite a bad move from Hikaru. He simply forgot about this tactical defense of the b5 pawn. Of course, Firouzja spots it pretty much instantly. By the way, he has 3.7 seconds here against Hikaru's 20. This looks like a crazy position to be holding. Hikaru in 2 seconds blunders. Blunders queen takes f3, and this knight check, collecting the pawn, and from here on out, it's a pretty straightforward conversion. Nice patience, by the way, from Firouzja here, playing f6 and not just taking the pawn right away, causes Hikaru to resign. Now, onto the final game. Sorry for a little spoiler there, but we do have pawn to e4 again. This game actually was pretty late in the blitz portion. I believe Firouzja had about a 5-point lead heading into this game, looking to make it a 6. But Hikaru was simply down so many games. He was getting desperate here, starts playing these hedgehog setups with queen c7, d6, b6, and he's looking to try and get spiky with it and you know, give Firouzja a little taste of his own medicine. But of course, white always has the advantage in these hedgehog setups. Look at this space. Firouzja putting all his pawns in the middle. Hikaru stuck on the 6th rank. Knight jumps back, queen d2. We get some more moves. Basically, Hikaru sacrifices a pawn here, trying to open the lines for his rooks and hope for some tactics here against Firouzja. But Firouzja is very calm and collected, plays this nasty move, g3. And the point of g3 is that you basically either take the draw or take a loss, because the only move here to basically hold equality for black is to give up this bishop, sacrifice king f1, and then queen h3 check, and the players should make a draw. But of course, Hikaru doesn't want a draw. He's -5 already. Firouzja weaponizing his advantage on the match score forces Hikaru to play for the win, bishop e5. And after knight to d4, which is a very nice move here, the pawn looks like it's hanging in the center. So for example, if you were to take, there is the move. I was going to say, I guess there's knight c6 in this one. And if you take the other way like this, with the knight takes, bishop takes, there is rook takes c8, sorry, and then knight to f5, going for knight e7 and attacking the bishop. So Firouzja, with all the tactical defenses here of the d5 pawn, finds this nice move, knight to d4, centralizing, looking to play f4, bishop f3, knight c6. He's just encroaching every which way. Hikaru plays g6, pretty desperate here, trying to stop knight to f5 in the line that I just showed you, but now he's getting pushed back, f4, bishop f3, queen e2, sidestepping any kind of pins down the center, and after the rook moves, knight c6, and the clamp is just going on. Bishop f2, a nice calm move, regrouping everything, and as soon as Hikaru lashes out on the queen side, the knight drives itself into b5, attacking the dark squared bishop. And once the bishop moves to pin, there's an exchange. He solidifies the final pony. Look at these horses guarded by their pawns. Both bishops spying down the long diagonal, rooks open, queen centralized. This is just a beautiful position, and he just pushes down the center of the board, and the game is pretty much over. The pawn has made it to the 6th rank. The two bishops are crushing. The queen is under attack. You just have to give up material here, and after queen b8, rook b1, basically the queen is trapped. Hikaru resigned the game. Now, this led to Hikaru entering the bullet portion, down 6 games, I believe, 5 or 6 games, and bullet portion was pretty back and forth, relatively equal, but unfortunately when you're down 6, you've got to be flawless, you've got to be winning back to back to back, and that just did not happen. So the game ended with, I think, a 5-point advantage for Firouzja. So we'll see who he plays, whether it be Magnus, whether it be Hans. It's going to be an interesting day tomorrow. Okay, so thank you. I do hope you guys enjoyed that recap. If you did, please do consider liking and subscribing. And as always, I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.